Good evening, everyone. My name is Sai Aditya Pradeep, and I'm the Scientific Program Manager for the AIM EFRC Center. And today we'll be presenting about our outreach webinar series, which focuses on 21st century skills, with the lecture topic on conflict resolution, evidence-based best practices by Dr. Dustin Sleesman. Uh, Before we begin, a bit about the outreach webinar series. So this particular series is organized by three independent centers. The first one is the AIM EFRC Center, whose mission is to build an AI-enabled inverse design approach for fundamentally understanding and integrating material manufacturing design of advanced polymer composites. Then we have the IDEAS NSF NRT traineeship. This focuses on training the next generation of STEM students to develop expertise across multiple disciplines, specializing in AI-enabled inverse design, advanced composites, and sustainable manufacturing. And last and certainly not the least, the Center for Plastics and Innovation, whose mission is to realize sustainable plastics manufacturing, integrating a systems-based and data-driven approach with molecular level understanding, selective and efficient catalytic pathways, advanced synthetic methodologies, high throughput screening, and comprehensive multi-scale experimental and computational characterization. This webinar series is currently in its season 2, which focuses on imparting key 21st century skills as identified by the National Academies Press. These skills include and are not limited to critical thinking, problem solving, analysis, reasoning, decision making, adaptive learning, information literacy, to name a few. The series also features talks focused on career paths in national labs, industry, and consulting. This webinar will be graciously hosted by Dr. Dustin Sleesman. Uh, a little bit about Dr. Sleesman. He is an associate professor of management and UDSWUFE Joint Institute Fellow at the Lerner College of Business and Economics at the University of Delaware. He received his PhD from Michigan State University. Dr. Sleesman studies several topics related to organizational behavior, psychology, including decision biases, conflict resolution, negotiation, team effectiveness, and leadership. His research has been published in leading academic journals, including Academy of Management Journal, Journal of Applied Psychology, Organizational Behavior and Human Decision Processes, and the Leadership Quarterly. His publications have been cited more than 1,000 times, and they have featured in various media outlets, including Forbes, Harvard Business Review, European Business Review, Dispute Resolution Magazine, Cheddar TV, and Delaware Public Radio. He has received numerous awards and recognition for his research and teaching, including the Outstanding Junior Faculty Award, Dean's Office Research Recognition Award, and UDSWUFE Joint Institute Fellowship from UD Learners College of Business and Economics. He's also a member of the International Association for Conflict Management. Professor Sleesman is a very passionate uh, uh, about his teaching and impact of his students. His teaching style blends evidence-based knowledge with practical skills that can be immediately put into use. He teaches a course in graduate and undergraduate programs at the University of Delaware and offers customized training and development workshops for various different organizations. Before I hand it over to Dr. Sleesman, I just want to take a minute or two just to acknowledge all our funding sources. So AMEFRC and Center for Plastics Innovation would definitely like to acknowledge funding received by the US Department of Energy, the Office of Science, under these award numbers. And also, we would like to thank the National Science Foundation Research Traineeship under this particular award number. Uh, we do these webinars monthly, but we might take a break for a month or two during summer. So more information about next webinars will be on all our social media or websites. So please be on the lookout for that. And with that, I will hand it over to Dr. Sleesman.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it. Welcome everyone. It's really a pleasure to be here and share some learning with you when it comes to conflict resolution. So that's the topic I was asked to speak on, and there's so many different topics related to conflict resolution. But as you'll see, I'm really going to focus on difficult conversations. I'll have more to say about that shortly. My presentation here will last roughly 45 minutes or so. And then I'll leave roughly 10 minutes for Q&A at the end. But I've got some interactive components where you all can kind of chime in. A few different times, just to make it a little interactive, so you're not here just listening to me drone on and on for a while. I'm going to repeat a little bit of things that Sai said, but I just want to give you a little bit of a background of myself. I went to Ohio State and Michigan State University, so I'm just kind of curious if if anyone in here is a Spartan or a Buckeye. Any of you into college football and you're not a Buckeye, you probably hate Ohio State, so just never mind this part of the presentation. But for my undergrad, I got a degree in business administration and in psychology. And then my PhD at Michigan State was in organizational behavior and human resource management. And I'm currently an associate professor of management in the business school at the University of Delaware. I've been here for almost 13 years. Most of my teaching is in negotiation and conflict resolution. I teach a course on that topic to our master's students and to our undergraduates. We have two separate courses. I occasionally teach managing people, teams, and organizations, and I frequently do corporate training and nonprofit training for various organizations. I do a lot of research as well. Much of my work focuses on the psychology of decision making, whether it's decision making biases or understanding how cognition influences our decision making. For instance, contrasting intuition with rational analysis is a really cool stream of research that I'm involved in. I also study team effectiveness, whether it's understanding how the personalities of team members affect team performance or understanding what motivates people in teams. Within negotiation and conflict resolution, most of my work focuses on, I guess you could say, the power of perception, how the way that we think reality is oftentimes shapes our reality. Kind of a philosophical view on these topics. And you'll probably see a little bit of that in this presentation today, actually. And then lastly, I study leadership. Honestly, it kind of overlaps into those other topics. Like I study the decision making of leaders and how leaders of teams influence conflict and that sort of a thing. So it's kind of a Venn diagram across these different areas. I want to just start by kind of taking a little roll call. I'm just really curious who is here. So if you could all just pop open the chat feature and just give us your job title. It doesn't need to be a formal title, but just tell me what you do and what organization you're a part of. Katie has a shout out to Central Michigan, close to MSU. Very good, very good. So again, if you could just go into the chat and then select everyone, make sure it's going to everyone and just mention, job title, organization, just so we have kind of an idea of who's here. Okay, awesome. There we go. So civil engineering at Clemson, research and development UD, professor UD, material science, PhD candidate, University of Florida. Oh, awesome. Got some colleagues down there. Postdoc at Clemson. Awesome. Director of Development Community Relations in South Jersey. Oh, awesome. Very good. Hey, Brian. I know Brian. He's a good guy. Researcher at OSU. All right. Lecturer at Clemson. PhD student, University of Tennessee. Outreach Program Coordinator at Clemson. Postdoc UTA. Okay, awesome. That's great. I don't want to read every single one, but we have quite a mix here, which is very exciting. Very good. Thank you all. I appreciate it. There'll be other times to share some things with me as well. So I want to start by kind of framing this session. My ground assumption is that no one understands your job better than you do. I'm not here to tell you how to do your job. Conflict resolution is a very contextual behavior. So really my goal is to introduce some research-based concepts to give you ideas for improvement, whether it's short-term and long-term, and hopefully you'll take these ideas and apply them to your job. And I also encourage everyone to take notes whenever you identify an actionable idea. I know me personally, whenever I do professional development, sometimes I kind of fool myself in thinking that I'll remember something, and inevitably I forget it or I forget the details unless I write it down. So I really encourage you all to do that. So, as I mentioned a little bit ago, within conflict resolution, there are so many different areas. I have an entire course on that topic, as I mentioned. But what I chose was difficult conversations because, as I'll discuss, it's so relevant to all of us, especially in our personal lives, but in our professional lives, but also in our personal lives as well. And as I mentioned, I'll make this very interactive, so there'll be times where you'll respond and provide your responses to everyone. So let's start with the basics here. So what is a difficult conversation? I'm not going to say a conversation that's difficult. That's a little bit of a cop-out. So I'll go by a definition that academics have proposed within this literature. It's an interaction that involves delivering bad news or critical feedback. And by bad news, what I mean is saying something the other person doesn't want to hear. And with critical feedback, this is focused on behavior. So saying the other person's behavior needs to change. It could be they're doing something they shouldn't be doing, or they're not doing something that they should be. So there's a corrective behavior aspect to it as well. There are so many different examples. In my world, I tend to focus on managers and leaders and employees. In this particular context, several examples exist. So, telling a job candidate they didn't get the position, maybe pointing out a colleague's mistake, talking to a customer about a problem that you or your colleague have made, or even giving a negative performance review. Um, if everyone wouldn't mind, if you could scan this QR code or type this URL into a browser, whether it's a phone or your laptop, tablet, whatever, just go ahead and go on this site. I use this online polling platform sometimes. So I'll give you a few seconds to, again, either scan that or type the code in, and you'll be able to respond. So the first question I'm going to ask you is how comfortable are you with engaging in difficult conversations? And you'll be able to see the options on the screen. So it's my worst nightmare. I hate it, but I can get by. I'm not a fan, but I'm pretty comfortable with it, and I'm pretty much a rock star. So we'll see what kind of a distribution we get here. Okay, results are pouring in here. Okay, okay. Well, so far it's my worst nightmares in the lead. Okay, that's fine. That's why we're here. It's all good. No one said I'm pretty much a rock star, so that's fine. I'd probably have you switch over to presenter view if that were the case. Okay, all right, very good. I have one more question. Just keep your phone or your browser open because it's kind of a two-parter. So the other part to this is, in only a few words, describe what your last work-related difficult conversation was about. And maybe it is one of those examples I provided. Maybe it's something different based on your context. But obviously, don't include any personal information or anything like that. But just kind of give us the gist. What was that? What was that topic? What was that work-related difficult conversation about? Or maybe it was a difficult conversation situation that you didn't engage in. So failure of an experiment, conflicting ideas on how to interpret experimental results and how to proceed appropriately. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, yeah, in that context, that might seem easy, but I can imagine, that you might have lost a lot of work, a lot of time, a lot of energy, and, explaining that to others, that's got to be terrible. Um, Leading a committee and explaining a short summary of progress, conflicts between co-advisors. Oh man, work habits, telling someone their funding was running out. Oh, that's terrible. Especially this day and age with all the funding shortages and uncertainty. I know at the University of Delaware, it's really affecting various parts of the university a lot with funding issues. So I can definitely sympathize with that. Working with students whose performance or effort needs to improve. I deal with that a lot as well. Difficulty explaining interns about the importance of work. Okay. Admitting a mistake, a silly mistake. Work environment, some sort of an office setting. Okay. Yep. A lot of potentially difficult conversations there. Different perspective on the same result. Okay, yep. Especially when it's very important to people and they might feel passionate about it. It might be their like pet project or pet idea that they want to kind of double down on. I've seen that happen quite a bit myself. Discussing a performance improvement plan with an employee, absolutely, that can be very defeating for the other side. All right, good. Thank you all for providing that. I just find it's helpful to kind of get a view for the different struggles that that people are having. So again, thank you for that. All right, so one kind of again fundamental question, but as you'll see, very important is why are difficult conversations so difficult? Seems very simple, but follow along with me. There are three primary kind of buckets of explanations. One is they're difficult on a physiological level, and I'm talking about autonomic responses in our body. So, for many people, when you are in a difficult conversation situation, your brain will trigger the release of the stress hormone cortisol. This can oftentimes increase your heart rate, your blood vessels can become enlarged, especially in the face, causing it to turn red and we blush. Hyperhidrosis can kind of set in, which is excessive sweating, especially in your palms, your armpits, and in your face. You just start to sweat. And again, your body is just automatically doing this. And then we can turn to the psychological level. And mostly here we're talking about anxiety and its related conditions. And of course, that can feed back right into the physiological. It's kind of a vicious cycle that happens. Excuse me. But also on a psychological level, the anxiety can cause us to have a hard time processing information and impair our memory recall. You may have had a situation where you got a really difficult situation and your brain kind of feels foggy in a sense, and you can't remember details that you should know because it's part of the conversation. That's the psychological effects kind of taking over, and it makes the situation even more stressful. And so it's incredibly difficult. Yeah, someone in the chat just mentioned your voice can potentially become loud, or it can actually have a reverse effect where it's kind of shaky. It can become weak. With this topic, it affects people in so many different ways, and hence the term difficult conversation. But here's where I'm going to take a little bit of a turn. The third bucket of reasons for why they're so difficult is morally. Now, that probably sounds really, really bizarre. And by the way, I'm not talking about the content of the difficult conversation. I'm not talking about a difficult conversation regarding a moral topic. No, I'm just saying difficult conversations, period, can have a moral aspect. And so this is a big reason why I'm presenting this topic today. There's an interesting stream of research in this literature that has really lifted up this moral view of difficult conversations. And me personally, I look at this topic so differently after discovering this research, and I hope that you all will as well. It's very illuminating to be honest. So what happens for many people is we kind of experience a difficult conversation situation as if we are in a moral dilemma, whether it's we have an opportunity to potentially lie or deceive someone or betray a colleague or a partner. We just kind of struggle with attention. And the research has discovered that in this sort of a situation, people kind of react very similarly. So the question is, what are those moral motivations? What is the tension that we struggle with? And you can see it on your screen here. So we feel pulled, many of us, when we're about to experience a difficult conversation between being honest and being kind. And I'm not saying these are consciously, salient or activated motivations. They can affect us sort of on a subconscious level. Like we can't really put our finger on it. We don't really know the tension we're experiencing, but this research has really shined a light on these two, honesty and kindness. So the way we feel this trade-off is, on the one hand, we can be honest with the other person by having the difficult conversation. So as I mentioned, delivering the bad news, giving the critical feedback, whatever it is, whatever the information is that you need to get off your chest. So you can be honest with them, but that really seems like it comes at the expense of kindness because it doesn't seem kind to make that person feel angry, disappointed, frustrated, a sense of shame, a sense of betrayal, damaging the relationship. All these things just don't seem very kind, especially because it's our actions, it's our being honest that is immediately triggering these negative emotions. So there's such a direct, like proximal causal effect that it is in our control. And so it feels like honesty just doesn't feel kind. And so we can think, okay, fine, I can't do this. And so what we do is oftentimes choose kindness. So we go on the other side over here to be kind. So what that means is not triggering negative emotions, not triggering that, sense of shame, disappointment, betrayal, whatever it is, by choosing to not be honest. And so we don't say anything. We don't engage in the difficult conversation because we're so concerned with being kind. And so you see what I'm talking about with this trade-off. I can be honest or I can be kind. Pick your poison. Which one do you want to do? And like I said, sometimes we just kind of just say forget about it. I can't do this. I can't have that conversation. It just doesn't feel kind, and so we choose honesty. And again, there's people with certain personality types that are especially susceptible to this, like people who are non-confrontational and conflict, people who are very agreeable and desire harmony with other people, and they don't want to ruffle other people's feathers. Those people in particular really feel this trade-off, and they tremendously feel this moral like tug of war. So this does affect some people more than others, but you can see these moral motivations and the tension between them. So this line of research has acknowledged these moral motivations, and it has found that when people experience this tension, we oftentimes make a couple of reasoning errors. Reasoning errors. So the first error people often make is that we overestimate the magnitude of harm that's caused by difficult conversations. Um, so the research on this particular reasoning error is actually very simple. It's just a simple like pre-post test. And so studies have asked people who are about to have a difficult conversation to basically report how bad is it going to be? How's this conversation going to go when you talk to your partner, your colleague, your boss, your direct report, whoever it is? Like, how bad is it going to be? And then they simply ask them after the difficult conversation, how bad was it? And what happened over and over and over again is that people thought it was going to be so much worse than it was. And again, sometimes it is worse than you think. Of course, of course. But the overall pattern by far was that we imagined it being so much worse than it would. And there's a very helpful concept, actually, from the world of clinical psychology and counseling that I'm sure many of you people have heard of. And that's called catastrophizing. We catastrophize, which basically means focusing on the negative and imagining kind of the worst possible outcome. Like you picture them being like furious with you or disappointed, breaking down, crying, and thinking that their life is over. We take things to the extreme. And actually, there's a therapy actually that has received the most evidence supporting it, to be honest. CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, especially for anxiety and depression related conditions, it really focuses a lot on catastrophizing and minimizing catastrophizing. It's not helpful. It's just a part of how we're wired, especially some people more than others. But as you see here, when it comes to a difficult conversation, it happens a lot. Um, and what these studies also discovered, kind of in conjunction with this, and this is really cool, I think. So, if you consider, okay, so after the difficult conversation, what really makes a lasting impact on the other side? Like, what is it that they walk away from and they really do, like, what really sticks in their memory? And what really sticks is the context of your conversation. So I'm talking about your intentions, your warmth. That actually matters more to people than the content of what you're saying. So the context, the kind of the feeling, the vibe you're giving in the conversation, that just has such a more lasting impact than the actual words that you're using. Which is weird because a lot of people, when they're about to have a difficult conversation, kind of like script things out. They've got their talking points and they want to word things the exact way. This research says, that's fine, but it's really the context that drives things. So I thought that was very illuminating personally. And I'm going to come back to that notion in just a few minutes. So just remember that context matters more than content. So that's the first reasoning error in this line of research. The second reasoning error is that people tend to focus more on short-term harm than long-term benefits of difficult conversations. And the research calls this an immediacy bias. Immediacy bias. So we think of the immediate downsides of engaging in the difficult conversation, whether it's anger, disappointment, surprise, defensiveness, strain on the relationship or perceived strain on the relationship, whatever it may be, whatever that negative emotion is that you're triggering. That's the short term harm that I'm talking about. So what are those benefits? Well, there's upsides to having a difficult conversation. Like, for instance, actually solving the problem rather than just sweeping it under the rug, demonstrating responsibility, especially if the difficult conversation is a part of your job. Like maybe you're a team leader or a manager and your job is having the conversation. So showing responsibility is having it. And so that's an upside. And this was really huge, I think. Being authentic and honest with people. Are you someone who can you know, speak your mind? Are you someone who can have, trusting or trustworthy conversations with other people? So the difficult conversation kind of gives you an opportunity to be your authentic self. Um, People don't think of that as an upside, but it really is. And then lastly, strengthening the relationship. This is also pretty cool, I think. If you think of even like personal relationship with someone, what really kind of toughens a relationship or gives it durability is having tough moments like hard conversations. And to have a lasting relationship, whether it's personal life or even a trusted relationship with colleagues. Many of us have relationships with, you don't think of it as a relationship, but you may know people for months, for years. You just work with them. What really strengthens that relationship, kind of going back to being your authentic self and not being afraid to have difficult conversations. And trust is a big part of this. You want to develop a lot of trust in your relationships. Well, difficult conversations can help with that. So these are kind of like the upsides of difficult conversations that kind of hide in the shadows, and we don't really think about them. It's all just in the here and now, the immediate, emotions that you're triggering is what tends to consume us. And so one implication from these ideas is that it's actually quite helpful to think more broadly about what does kindness actually mean? Is it all just about avoiding those short-term negative emotions, which I actually kind of suggested um, earlier because of the tension? Or is it being your authentic self? Is that what kindness means? Perhaps it is. Perhaps kindness is being open, being your authentic self, maybe doing what's right, like, speaking your mind and saying something that you should say. Well, just say it. And frankly, it can be unkind to keep thoughts to yourself in a certain sense. And I think that will resonate with people if you think of situations where someone's withheld their thoughts from you. So they have not engaged in the difficult conversation. And that kind of hurts. That can be kind of painful as well. So think of it from the other side's perspective too. So if honesty and kindness are actually not such a clear trade-off, like it's sort of like an illusory tension. It's not real. It's in our head. It's like a straw man argument. Um, if it's not really a tension or a trade-off like this, then how should we think about them? Because I'm not saying that honesty and kindness aren't relevant to difficult conversations. I'm just saying this line of research says they don't have to be competing with each other, even though it kind of feels like that. But we can actually transcend this trade-off. And rather than viewing them as like a single continuum, and each side is on each end of the continuum, it's helpful to think about them as two different dimensions, two independent dimensions, like this. Where you have kindness, you see on the bottom, it's going from the bottom left, it's getting stronger or higher over to the right. And then honesty, starting with the bottom, as it goes up, honesty gets higher. So let's start to put these together. Basically, we can establish a 2 by 2 matrix. So we have what I'll call box number one here, where you have honesty is very high, but notice kindness is low. Kindness is low. And so we can choose to handle the difficult conversation in this box, being just brutally honest with someone and delivering the cold, hard truth, you could say. So some people think like that's what a difficult conversation is, period. Who cares how mad they get? Who cares if it damages the relationship? Just say it. Just say it. That's the mentality that represents box number one. So, again, is that having the difficult conversation? Yes, it is. But that's just one way that you could do it. There's other ways too. So, check out box number two. We have kind of the opposite in effect. Notice how honesty's low here. Honesty's low, but kindness is high. So, what does that look like? For instance, giving someone false hope or insincere flattery, like, if you're giving a performance appraisal and the performance is like really bad, you might sugarcoat it. Oh, you're doing a really great job, or maybe delivering a little bit of the truth, but really wrapping it around a lot of, flattery and praise. And they're not really getting the message. And that's kind of the point, right? The point is to make them feel good, even if what you're delivering is not exactly the truth. Now, again, that's an option you have. Is that engaging in the difficult conversation? Yes, it is. It is. It's just different than box number one. And notice so far with box number one and two, we're actually still viewing them as a trade-off, right? Because in box number one, it's high honesty. Box number two, high kindness. So it's each choosing one or the other. So we're still not out of that perceived tension yet. So that leads us to box number three, which is actually low on both dimensions. Not being honest, not being kind. What does that look like? That looks like non-confrontation. You are just not having the difficult conversation at all. Maybe hoping that it'll just resolve, the other person will forget about it, it'll just magically get better. And sometimes it does, but sometimes it may escalate. We're kind of leaving it in kind of fate's hands. Like who knows what's going to happen if you use box number three. So that's the one, unlike all these other boxes, that's the one where you're just not having the difficult conversation. All right, so we got a drum roll leads us to box number four. And this is what I call the sweet spot because you are maximizing both dimensions, both dimensions. So you are being honest with them, but you're making your kindness intentions clear and providing resources to cope with the situation or to learn and perhaps get better over time and make improvements. I've written out some examples for what this box number four might look like. So check this out. First, I'm giving you this feedback because I know you're capable of achieving high standards. Or I want to be honest with you because I want our relationship to improve. Or I need to get this off my chest because I believe in being open and transparent with my work team. Notice in every single one of these statements is the word because. Because I know, because I want, because I believe. So you're focusing on the why. You're focusing on the why. And this relates back to what I said earlier about the context mattering more than the content. Because look at this, every single one of these, it's just framing the conversation. You're framing it in a kind manner rather than just jumping right to the honesty. You're kind of wrapping it around kind of like a sheath or a package of kindness. And so, whatever I'm about to tell you, just understand where it's coming from. That's basically what all these examples illustrate on the screen here. So that's the first point. And then in terms of providing resources to cope or learn, um, here are some examples. So maybe please reach out to me or another manager right away next time. We're always here for you. Or maybe they're potentially losing composure, which does happen. Feel free to go out and get some fresh air for a few minutes. So I'm kind of acknowledging your state and I'm allowing you to cope. I'm trying to help you cope. Or after the difficult conversation, perhaps I'm just following up on our conversation to see if there's anything I can do to help. So maybe just a quick, text message or something like that. Again, it shows kindness even after the fact. And so what this is doing here is it's kind of breaking down barriers. It's introducing a spirit of cooperation and support, and rather than being an adversary. It's not me versus you. It's like us, and we need to get through this, and I need to share this information with you, and I want to do it, in a very supportive way. Again, this goes back to the context, setting the right context, honesty and the context of kindness. So I want to get your thoughts here. We only have about 10 minutes or so before I want to get into the Q&A period. But what I'd like to do is come up just kind of collectively, because we got different organizations, different contexts, and that's fine. We got a really cool, diverse crowd here. Um, I'd like us to come up with some real examples in each category. Um, so if you could just type in the chat to everyone, just a one sentence description of a difficult conversation you've been a part of. Maybe you were the initiator or the receiver. Either side's fine. But if you could just give a description of that, I'd like to start with box number one, where it's kind of, again, brutally honest, delivering the cold, hard truth, very honest, but not going out of the way to be kind. So if someone could provide an example, or just a couple, if a few people could provide an example of just a one sentence description, like what did that conversation look like, and kind of just describe it a bit to make it clear that it is actually box number one. So I'll give you just a little bit of time to type that in. And again, just one sentence, just kind of giving us a feel for how in the real world people are using box number one to have the difficult conversation. Okay, John, thank you, Jonathan. Jonathan started us off. Just someone was told, just you messed up, and here's how you messed up. So just jumping right to it, not taking time to lay out the context or frame the conversation at all, just jumping straight to honesty. And many times that is kind of a mistake, and we're not like honoring kindness. We're not taking that into account when we just start the conversation like that. Telling my boss that a colleague misrepresented company records. Oh my. Um, yeah, that could potentially be box number one. Um, Nicholas focuses on conversation being about my work performance, but offered no real solutions to resolve it. Oh, okay. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So you don't feel like supported. You don't feel like it's a problem-solving thing. Like I'm here to help you. I'm here to help you learn and improve. It's just your performance is low, and kind of leaving it that. Yeah, I could definitely see how you don't feel supported in that for sure. Thank you, Nicholas. Sogar, letting an undergraduate intern know that without changing their approach, doing a research thesis is not a good idea for them. Okay, okay. Sure. Yeah, I mean, that could potentially be part of a different box, but in your case, it was just total honesty, not much kindness. Katie's focusing on critical written comments and writing drafts received without context. Okay, yeah, yeah, yeah. That's kind of an interesting example, Katie. I found that if there is an existing, like, highly trusting relationship where you know that their honesty is kind, um, sometimes that context isn't necessary, because we kind of assume the best, like, oh, that person would never say that to be intentional. I'm sure they didn't mean it that way, that sort of a thing. So sometimes the kindness can be implied in a highly trusting relationship, but I see what you're saying. All right, let me jump to box number two. So let's switch our attention. If I could have a few people give me an example of box number two. So it was a difficult conversation. So we've got some bad news, critical feedback, but how is it being delivered? It's being sugar-coated big time. So there's a huge focus on kindness, making the other person perhaps feel really good, but not really being honest with them. You're kind of holding back your true thoughts. So if someone has a good example of box number two, just put that in the chat. You are a genius comment. Yeah. Kind of pumping up the ego of the other person, just like making them feel really, really, really good when it's kind of exaggerating a bit. Sai says, you're doing great, just keep it going, even though you're really far behind and need serious help to pass. Yeah, that's huge because imagine if they don't actually improve. It just keeps getting worse and worse and worse. And then maybe they're asked to join another team or they're dismissed. They're, separated from the organization. And if that were me, I would think, well, why didn't you tell me? Like, why weren't you honest the whole time? You said I was doing such a great job. And that's a good example of what I said earlier. Sometimes this can be very unkind to sugarcoat things because they need to hear the truth, especially if it's your, leader, it's your manager who's not being, forthcoming with you and not transparent with you. That can kind of set you up for failure. So, sorry, that's a really good one. Let me switch to box number three, where we're low on both dimensions. So you're not being honest, you're not being kind. I know it's kind of hard to describe that because you're not actually having the difficult conversation. But if someone could give me even like a context, like what was the situation where you decided to not have the difficult conversation? Like, I don't want to engage. I can't do this. I don't want to do this. I'm, very concerned about backlash. I'm concerned about damaging the relationship, and so I'm just not going to do anything. So if someone has a good example of that, just type it into the chat. A lot of people who are new as managers or team leaders, um, a lot of times they kind of live in box number three for a while because they're just kind of afraid of sharing their true thoughts, and they maybe not quite go into box number two and the false hope and sincere flattery. They just kind of sit back and kind of don't do much of anything. And actually, the leadership literature is pretty clear that uh, a very passive, laissez-faire style of leadership tends to be very ineffective, by the way. So that's really not recommended from a leadership perspective, to be honest. Thank you, Nicholas. He's got an example of being mad or frustrated with a coworker and then just kind of avoiding them if possible. So perhaps something is bothering me, but I'm just not I'm not going to say anything. I'm just going to keep it to myself. That sort of a thing. Size focusing on, everything looks fine and we'll discuss improvements later. And you just kind of keep kicking the can. He says, if a project is really far off track and it needs urgent fixes, but you just don't do anything. Again, this goes back to that the very passive style of leadership. Again, not effective. It really isn't. Someone being abused, I think is what you mean there, and not reacting to it. Oh my goodness, yeah, that's terrible. Yeah, that could be bullying. That could be, withholding important information from a coworker. That sort of thing happens. I've got some colleagues in my field who study that. They study abusive leadership and sabotage and, backstabbing, deceiving coworkers. Like, there's an entire like research space where people study that. Actually, one of my advisors early in my career studied employee theft and what leads employees to steal from their organization. And many times they feel justified in doing it. There's almost always a reason, like I'm entitled to steal this thing, whatever it is. So yeah, that sort of negative thing happens a lot more than people realize. So thank you for sharing that. Let me pivot to the last box, box number four. So we are high on both dimensions. So high honesty, high kindness. So if you could just think of an example and describe it into the chat box. So again, you're honest and making kindness intentions clear. You're providing resources to cope or to learn. So you've got the transparent honesty. You are really being authentic, but you are doing it in a very like kind way. You're making your intentions clear. You're offering resources if you can. That sort of a thing. So if someone has an example, just throw that into the chat. And it's hard too. You know, this box number 4, I don't mean to make it seem easy. It takes time. It really does. It takes time to frame the conversation, especially in today's world where everything's so fast paced, everyone's behind, and you've got such a long task list. And sometimes we just want to just jump straight to it and just, hurry up, have the meeting as efficiently as possible, have the email, the reporting system as efficient as possible, and, stick right to the facts. Well, unfortunately, that could be perceived as box number 1. With our rush for efficiency and time management, sometimes it can be kind of hard to devote the time for box number 4. But again, like that's what good leaders do, is they really focus a lot on the context, and they invest the extra time in the relationship with that person. So Nicholas is talking about giving a helpful suggestion on how a project can be done. So again, it's not just a suggestion, it's a helpful suggestion, ideas, resources. It's coming from a place of continuous improvement, that sort of a thing. Jonathan's talking about appreciating that you're trying to take on all the work, but you need to make sure you're reaching out to others for help if you're drowning. Yeah, exactly. So that's a fantastic example of giving resources to cope. If things are really hard, like come to me, come to someone, come to anyone. I want things to improve, and you're really focusing on that. Again, that's really about the context. So great job, Jonathan. That's great. Um, There's a question on how to develop the skills for box number 4 when we need to react instantly. Yeah, that's a good question. That gets at the crux of this, the crux of what I was just saying in terms of setting the context. It can take a little bit of time, but it doesn't have to take a lot. Like for instance, just go back to some of these examples I gave. Before I provide a feedback to a team member. It's just, I'm giving this feedback because I know you're capable of achieving high standards. Like literally, the context could be that one sentence, the one sentence. So it doesn't have to be, a massive endeavor in terms of the context. I mean, it can, you can, but it doesn't have to. So, I know I said this, it can take time, but it doesn't have to. That's what I said earlier about like a lot of this stuff is really nuanced and it depends on the context. But again, I'm just trying to lay out a framework and just kind of think of this differently. If you took my class on conflict resolution, we cover a whole bunch of um, techniques and just different strategies for engaging in box number 4. But unfortunately, we don't quite have the time to go into that. But again, even like one sentence can really help frame things. But so thank you. I appreciate the question there. Okay, so I guess the last thing I wanted to kind of bring up here is kind of a philosophical question. I wanted everyone to kind of ponder a moment now that I've walked you through all 4 boxes. So some have argued that if you want to have a difficult conversation, it's actually never ideal to pursue strategies 1 or 2. You should always try strategy 4 first. And I'm kind of curious if you have a thought on this, just type it into the chat because I've run across people who agree with this and many people who disagree with this. Some people really do think that it's best to just, stick to high honesty and not go too far out of your way to be kind. And I know that sounds harsh, but again, people have different personalities, people have different values, and for some individuals, the kindness dimension isn't as important to them. But I would argue that if your objective is to build or maintain relationships, a big part of that is trust and authenticity. And it's just so hard to establish that if you're not focused on kindness. So I do think that this is the case. Like, why not try strategy 4 first? Now, sometimes strategy 4 doesn't work right away. you know, being honest with kindness, maybe they don't get the message and you might try it again and again and it's just not coming through. And then maybe box number one is all you have left. Like you just have to be very frank. Look, you're not going to get the promotion. I'm not sure how else to say this, you know. So I guess my take is sometimes that's necessary, but that shouldn't be the starting point. Why not try number four? If it doesn't work, then if necessary, then move to box number one. That's my take. Again, people can feel free to disagree, and a lot of this ties back to our personality, our values. So that's why I said this is kind of a philosophical question, but hopefully I've kind of stimulated some thoughts regarding that particular thing. Yeah, Nicholas said it depends on the situation. That's a common answer in my classes, which is true. Yeah, like oh, so many things are contextual. Absolutely, Nicholas. So just to summarize quickly here, difficult conversations involve delivering bad news or critical feedback, and extremely common across pretty much any job, especially if there's a leadership or management aspect to it, and life in general, even in our personal lives. And it's helpful to recognize that difficult conversations have this moral component, and people oftentimes shy away from tough conversations because they just feel so torn. Like, should I be honest? Should I be kind? But if we actually think of these conversations as kind of an opportunity to be both honest and kind, it can be very helpful and very enlightening. Like I said, like I've really looked at this topic very differently after running across this stream of research recently, and I've really appreciated it. Hopefully, you kind of see this topic in a new light as well. I'm going to open it up for Q&A.